Hello again and welcome to another Warhammer 40k Mordy and Glory video. Today we are going to be doing another unit review, this time taking a look at a rather unique unit in the new Guard Codex. It's time for Gaunts Ghosts. Now, in case you've not seen one of these videos before, what I like to do is start off with a unit overview, going through the stats, war gear, and abilities of the unit. I then move over to a deep dive. This is where we really get into the nitty-gritty of the unit, and I start doing a bit more analysis, looking at the pros and cons and how you can expect to use this thing on the battlefield. Finally, we wrap it up with a score out of 10 and some summary thoughts. And without further ado, Men of Tanith, do you want to live forever? Let's dive straight into today's episode. So, Gaunts Ghosts are a unique HQ choice that you can take for your Astra Militarum army. You'll find them in the same area as your Cadian Castellans and your platoon command squads, but they are essentially a named character unit. This means, like Ursula Creed and Strachan and the Lord Solar, you can never include this unit more than once in your army. Rather uniquely for a named character unit, the squad consists of 6 characters that must all stay together like a command squad or an infantry squad. Each one of these named characters brings a unique ability and set of war gear to the unit, and overall, when operating at full capacity, Gaunts Ghost does make quite an effective combat command unit. What makes Gaunts Ghost so interesting and will attract a lot of players towards using them is the fact that they are a unique blend of many other types of guard unit. They have the command abilities of a senior officer combined with those of a commissar, whilst at the same time featuring a lot of bodies like a command squad, but having much more focus towards damage output like an elite infantry unit such as Kazakin or Scions. Overall, I would describe them as a combat-focused command unit. But now let's take a closer look at the different war gear, abilities, and stats available within this squad. And we'll begin with Colonel Commissar Ibram Gaunt. He has a movement of 6, a weapon skill of 2+, a ballistic skill of 2+, strength 3, toughness 3, 4 wounds, 3 attacks, leadership 9, and a 4+ save. He comes equipped with a bolt pistol, Gaunts chainsword, straight silver knife, and frag grenades. Now, the bolt pistol and frag grenades are fairly standard issue, but Gaunts chainsword and the straight silver knife are much more interesting. Straight silver knife is a straight up combat blade that comes with AP-1. Think of it a bit like an Astartes chainsword, but it doesn't give you the extra attack. Every single model in this unit, by the way, does have a straight silver knife. So if I don't go over the stats for each individual guy, now you know that basically when each model in this unit fights, they're fighting at AP-1. This didn't used to be such a big deal, but with Arm Contempt now going away, it's actually pretty nice that this squad can pump out quite a lot of AP-1 attacks. But I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself here. Looking at Gaunts Chainsaw, this is a much better profile. It is Strength User, which is Strength 3, but it is AP-1, but it's Damage 2, and each time the bearer fights, it makes D3 additional attacks. This means that on average, Gaunt is going to be putting out 5 attacks each time that he fights at AP-1, and each one of those that goes through will slay the equivalent of a Space Marine Intercessor. This overall makes Gaunt a very combat-orientated leader. He has a weapon skill of 2+. That's one of the best weapon skills that you'll find in any individual character in the Guard Codex. Only Strachan, and I also believe the Lord Solar, also have weapon skill 2. So even though he has only 5 attacks and they are only strength user, pretty much all of the attacks are going to hit, and when they do go through, you are going to be tearing a chunk out of the enemy. So Gaunt is a pretty decent combat character. Each one of the characters in this squad, including Gaunt, comes with a special ability that they add to the unit. And in Colonel Commissar Ibram Gaunt's case, each time this unit takes a morale test, if it contains Colonel Commissar Ibram Gaunt, that test is automatically passed. Basically, this unit is fearless. That is actually quite a unique ability to have. In most Warhammer 40k armies, GW has done a big job of taking out fearless abilities from their rosters, and now we're seeing it come back with Gaunts Ghosts. Do I expect this to have a huge impact on the squad? Not overly. I mean, it's a 6-man unit. It's got leadership 9 as long as Gaunt is around. You'd have to lose 4 guys before they'd even have a risk of losing the morale. So it's not a major bonus, but it is just an interesting thing to be aware of. And it does mean that your squad is fearless. Next up, we've got Colonel Colm Corbeck. He also has a 6-inch movement. Now, his weapon skill is 3+, and ballistic skill is 3+, and he's strength 3, toughness 3, 4 wounds, 3 attacks, leadership 8, and a 5+ save. He's got a very similar profile to Gaunt. Obviously, his weapon skill and ballistic skill are slightly lower, but he's got the same number of wounds and the same number of attacks. Now, Colonel Corbeck comes with Corbeck's Hotshot Las Carbine, Straight Silver Knife, and frag grenades. So, like Gaunt, Corbeck is pretty good in combat. He does get 3 attacks. They are going to be at AP -1 thanks to Straight Silver Knife. But the main reason that you're taking a look at this guy is for that Hotshot Las Carbine. It's a 24-inch range weapon. It's Assault 3. It's Strength 3, AP -2, Damage 1. Essentially, it's a bit of a pimped up hotshot rifle that you're going to find on your Scions. It's a pretty good gun, and bear in mind that there's nothing stopping this unit from benefiting from Born Soldiers or other regimental doctrines. It really does mean that this individual rifle can put out a fairly impressive amount of damage. Overall, I would describe Corbeck as more of a balanced character within the unit. He has enough attacks to be able to do a decent amount of damage in combat, but he's also got a pretty good gun as well. He's definitely a jack of all trades, master of none. Now, Colm Corbeck's ability is once per battle round. If this unit contains Corbeck, when this unit is selected for an Astra Militarum or core stratagem, that stratagem costs 1 fewer CP to use to a minimum of 0. But you have to be aware that you can only use this CP reduction on each stratagem once. So, for example, if you decide to use Ingrained Precision on Gaunt's Ghosts, that's great. The first time you use Corbeck's ability, that CP will cost you nothing. But then if you go to use Ingrained Precision the next turn, it is going to cost you a CP. So you can't just keep getting stratagems for free. Now, on paper, this sounds like a brilliant ability. Oh, wow, I can use it on any Astra Militarum stratagem that's going to affect this unit. Fantastic. The problem is that I am worried that it actually doesn't really have a big impact. Because when you go through the various stratagems in the Guard Codex, a lot of them don't actually apply to Gaunt's Ghost because they're not core and they've not got the platoon keyword. So, for example, you can't use Armored Fist on them because that requires an Astra Militarum core unit. You can't use Vengeance of Cadia because they are not Cadian or platoon. So that's a bit of a problem there. You can't use Cadian Stance, obviously they're not Cadian. You can use Ingrained Precision. You can't use Overlapping Fields of Fire. Can't use Volley Fire. You can use Experienced Eye, so you could get them up to an extra AP in the shooting phase. You can do that for free if you are taking Elite Sharpshooters. Oh no, you can't use that one either because it's core. So you can't use Experienced Eye. Can't use Immovable Doctrination. Can't use any of the vehicle ones. You could use Field Promotion. Yeah, when you actually go through, the list is actually pretty low, to be honest. I think, in fact, looking at it now, the only ones that I can see would benefit is if you have taken Mechanized Infantry as a regimental doctrine, which would give you Mount Up, and that will cost you 1 less CP. You could use Vicious Traps, which is all right, I suppose. And I'm looking at Ingrained Precision. And that's it. Oh, sorry, you probably would also be able to use the Battlefield Promotion as well. So you can turn Gaunt into your Warlord or give him a Warlord trait if you need to. But apart from that, very few stratagems actually affect them. So it's a really cool ability on paper, but sadly the unit doesn't have the keywords to really take advantage of it. Next up, we've got Major Elim Rawn. Now, he's got a movement of 6, a weapon skill of 3+, a ballistic skill of 3+, strength 3, toughness 3, only 3 wounds. Remember, Gaunt and Corbeck both had 4, but he does still have 3 attacks, leadership 7, and a 5+ save. Rawn comes equipped with a Las Carbine, a Straight Silver Knife, and frag grenades. Now, the Lad's Carbine is not as good as Corbex. It's not a hotshot version, so it is just 24-inch range, Assault 3, Strength 3, AP dash, damage 1. On the surface, you might be forgiven for thinking that Rawn is a little bit underwhelming. It's basically just a guy with a fancy lad's gun, but you don't really want to be looking at him in isolation. Remember, he's part of a bigger squad, and what's becoming clear at this point is just quite how many attacks this unit is able to pump out. We're only halfway through the number of characters, and yet we are looking at a unit that's putting out an average of 11 attacks. All of those have got at least AP -1, and all the attacks are hitting on a 3+ or a 2+ in the case of Gaunt. So what Rawn is really adding is just more weight of dice and more decent quality close combat attacks to the unit. He's also adding an amount of disposable durability to the unit as well. He is still a 3-wound character, which is pretty nice. And his special ability is, at the start of the fight phase, if this unit contains Major Elim Rawn, select one enemy unit within engagement range of this unit. That unit cannot fight until after all other eligible units from your army have done so. Basically, if you're in combat with an enemy unit, you can be like, you're fighting last. Even if you're the defender and normally you get to strike first, you're fighting last and we're going to get the drop on you, which is actually quite a strong ability for this squad to have. After Rawn, we have Master Sniper Helene Larkin. He has a 6-inch movement, weapon skill 3+, but a ballistic skill of 2+. He is our main shooter in the squad. He is strength 3, toughness 3. He's still got 2 wounds, but he's only bringing 1 attack to the pile, which is a bit of a shame, but he's still hitting on a 3+ with it. And he's got a leadership of 6 and a armor save of 5+. Larkin comes with Larkin's Long Lass, a straight silver knife, and frag grenades. Now, Larkin's Long Lass is actually a pretty heavy-duty piece of kit. It is a 36-inch range weapon. It's heavy 1. It's strength 5. AP -2, it's a flat 3 damage. The enemy cannot use Lookout Sir, so it can pick out characters, and each time an attack is made with this weapon on an unmodified wound roll of a 6, the target suffers D3 mortal wounds in addition to any normal damage. This is probably one of the most powerful sniper rifles in Warhammer 40k. It's certainly the most powerful one you'll find in the Guard Codex. It's even more powerful than the Kazakin's Hot Shot sniper rifle, so it is a very, very, very good gun. It's only 1 shot, but if you do manage to get the hit, which you should do on a 2+, then it means that you're more than likely going to wound most characters you shoot at, because it's strength 5. That is a quite nice sweet spot, considering most characters in the game are, toughness 4. AP -2 means that you're probably going to bump them onto their invulnerable save pretty quickly. And then the damage 3 means that if you get the shot through, you're going to be taking a chunk out of them. Now, the one issue I have with Larkin's Long Lass is that it doesn't really have the ability to one-shot most characters out there, unless you get the D3 mortal wounds in addition. If you do manage that, you are looking at 5 damage, which is enough to knock out Space Marine captains and Space Marine lieutenants and their equivalent. But I think Larkin's Long Lass is a decent gun, but it's not the main reason you should be taking the unit. The big thing that Larkin brings to the squad is each time model in this unit makes a ranged attack. If this unit contains Master Sniper Helene Larkin, that target does not receive the benefits of cover against that attack. So it does mean that he is boosting the damage output of the other guys in the squad. But when you're looking at what they're really bringing to the squad, you're looking at a couple of Las Carbines. You've got Corbex's Hotshot Las Carbine. You've got Gaunt's Bolt Pistol. There's an autocannon in there being run by Bragg. But overall, this unit doesn't have a lot of long-range fire output. And like I said, more than likely you're going to be using it as some kind of combat command squad. It's a nice ability to have. It certainly helps Larkin out when he's shooting at enemy units in cover. But overall, I think he is an extra body in the squad, and that's probably how you should treat him. Next up, we've got Trooper Try Again Bragg, who is the muscle of the squad. He comes with movement of 6, weapon skill of 3+, ballistic skill of 5+, strength 4, toughness 3, 2 wounds, 2 attacks, leap 7, and a 5+ save. So he has got the best strength of anyone in the unit, but he does also have the worst ballistic skill. Yep, it's not a mistake that he hits on a 5+. His lore is that he always misses the first time, so that's why he's called Try Again. It's a bit of an in-joke in the regiment. He's a very big, strong, muscly guy, but he can't hit the broadside of a barn. He is single-handedly wielding an autocannon, though, which is pretty cool and pretty badass, I'm not going to lie. Now, speaking of his equipment, like I said, he does come with an autocannon and a straight silver knife and frag grenades. The autocannon is nothing special. It's a standard autocannon with range 48, heavy 2, strength 7, 8 mass 1, 2 damage. And the big reason that you take Bragg, or the reason he's in the squad, I should say, because he comes as standard, is that he has a couple of abilities. Actually, he brings 2 abilities to the unit. First up, if the unit moves, then no one suffers the penalty for moving and shooting with heavy weapons. Realistically, that only affects Bragg himself and also Larkin. It's a nice little ability to have, but it's not a major one. The other thing is, in addition, in your shooting phase, after this unit has finished making its attacks, if no hits were scored with Trooper Try Again Bragg's autocannon, Trooper Try Again Bragg can immediately shoot again with its autocannon. What this means is that Bragg always gets at least 1 hit with the autocannon, because if you shoot the unit and Bragg hasn't got any hits, then he gets to shoot again. Now, if he still hasn't got any hits, he gets to shoot again. And you keep rolling those dice until he gets at least 1 hit. So Bragg always gets to fire his autocannon and just keeps getting to firing it until he gets at least 1 hit through, which is kind of funny. And there is actually a way to abuse this slightly, because technically you could fire the unit, and if Bragg throws a frag grenade, then technically he has fired and the unit has fired, but he hasn't got any hits. So then he would get to shoot his autocannon. Now, in previous iterations of this unit, that was actually fully broken. It just said if Bragg didn't get any hits with his autocannon, he gets to shoot again. It didn't specify with his autocannon. So he used to be called Try Again Frag, because technically Bragg could roll an infinite amount of frag grenade hits. That has now been fixed. It specifically says if he hasn't got any hits, then he gets to fire again with his autocannon. So you can only pull off the Try Again Frag trick once now. You throw the frag grenade, you get whatever hits you get with it. You then technically didn't hit with the autocannon, then you get to fire the autocannon. It's a pretty cool ability, but again, overall, I would say treat Bragg as an extra couple of wounds in the unit with a little bit of damage output. Now, last but certainly not least, we have got Scout Sergeant McCall. McCall is probably one of the best models in this squad, even competing with Gaunt for damage output and awesomeness, because he has a movement of 6. He is also weapon skill 2+ and ballistic skill 2+. He's strength 3, toughness 3. He only has 2 wounds, but he does come with 4 attacks. That's more than Corbeck. That's more than Rawn. He is by far the second best combat character in this unit. Now, he comes with a lad's carbine, straight silver knife, and frag grenades. But the real reason that we love McCall so much, and the reason I said he is as important to this squad as Gaunt, is because as long as he is alive, his special ability is the rest of the unit gets a 5+ invulnerable save. This massively increases the durability of the squad. Takes it from running around with a bunch of 5+ armor saves to suddenly 33% of the damage going through against it. It's just gone. And when you add up all the wounds in the unit, you've got 4, 8, 11, 13, 15, 17 wounds in this unit. All of them with the 5+ invulnerable save. That is actually a pretty durable squad to have to deal with. So that covers all of the different characters in the unit. It covers all of their equipment and their abilities and their stats. But there are 2 other abilities that we need to take a look at before we get into the deep dive. Firstly, you've got the Covert Stealth Team. This allows the unit to forward deploy very similarly to your Ratlings and your Scout Sentinels. Basically, when you're setting the unit up, it can deploy 9 inches away from the enemy deployment zone or other enemy units. You've also got the Tanith Camo Cloak, which is a very cool ability. It means that you cannot target this unit with ranged attacks if it's over 18 inches away. It's a bit like how the Tau Ghost Kill operates. Also, Each time you make an attack against this unit, it is -1 to hit. That is ranged attacks, not -1 to hit in close combat. And also, when they are in cover against ranged attacks, they get another +1 to the armor saving throw, like standard camo cloaks. So overall, Times Camo Cloak is adding a lot of extra durability to the squad. Last but certainly not least, it's important to note that Colonel Commissar Abraham Gaunt is both an officer and a commissar, which means that he does know regimental and prefector's orders. He is one of the few units in the game which innately knows more than one kind of order. I think the only other one that does is the Lord Solar. So that's pretty cool if you're looking for a unit that can both do officer and commissariat support. Gaunt's Ghost is actually pretty tasty. Saves you having to put superior tactical training on a command squad. You can use that CP somewhere else if you need to. But that finally covers the unit overview. I know we did sprinkle some tactical analysis in there, but you can't help but do that when you're covering a unique unit like this, which is made up of lots of cool, interesting models. Overall, the main takeaway is, though, this is a squad that has a lot of flexibility. It comes with a lot of special abilities. It's surprisingly durable, and its damage output is actually more combat focused than shooting focused. But now, let's start doing the deep dive, really getting into the nitty gritty of how you can use this unit on the battlefield. So one of the traditional ways of using Gaunt's Ghost is as a very reliable objective holder. They used to be pretty good at this in their previous incarnation, and they've only got better at it in the 9th edition book. As I've pointed out a number of times, this unit is wildly durable for its points cost. It's 120 points, and it's getting loads of wounds, and they've got a 5% invulnerable save against ranged attacks. They're -1 to hit if you're even allowed to shoot them, because over 18 inches away, you just can't physically target them. And if they're in cover, then Gaunt is strutting around like a Terminator, because he's got a 4+ save base. He has a camo cloak, so he gets +2 to a save and cover, so that's a 2-up save. And he's still running around with a 5% vulnerable save if someone decides to hit him with a melter gun. So the unit is actually just really durable, and it can't even be targeted. And what's really good about this squad is that if you give Gaunt a Warlord trait, which you can do using Officer Cadres, nothing stopping you from doing that, then he gets Lead by Example. And Lead by Example allows him to order his own unit. Even though it's an officer unit, he can still order it. Because he knows Prefector's orders, he can order his own unit with the Commissar order at all costs. This gives them objective secured. And that means that you have just a unit that is just really good at just sitting on objectives, just completely locking it down. And the best bit is that they will probably be able to put out some damage against the enemy without the enemy even being able to retaliate. I mean, look at the majority of the weapons in the squad. They're all 24-inch range or longer. If you're using something like heirloom weapons, suddenly all of those large carbines and Corbex hotshot large carbine, they're all 28-inch range. That means that you've got a 10-inch no man's land where you can shoot at the enemy and the enemy can't shoot at you because of, again, you can't shoot them if you're over 18 inches away from them. Also means that the autocannon is going to be able to shoot with impunity. It can do that whether it's got heirloom weapons or not. Same with Larkin's Longlast. So you've got a unit that could potentially be sat on your backfield, plinking away. Bear in mind, these weapons are not rapid fire. They're all like Assault 3, so they're getting maximum shots from maximum range. So you can have a unit that's 28 inches away, just firing away. You can use ingrained precision on them. Gaunt could be telling them to take aim if he needs to. So suddenly they're all hitting on 2. Suddenly all those large carbines are becoming AP -1. Enemies not getting cover against them because of Larkin. So they can just sit there, firing away, putting out 9 las carbine shots with various AP, a couple of autocannon shots of which you're guaranteed to get a shot every turn with it because of Bragg, and a hotshot rifle, which is so powerful it can blow a space marine in half without even really trying. So it's not actually a bad squad for just sitting on objectives and just firing away, being objective secured when it needs to be, and not really being targeted by the enemy unless they somehow manage to break through your lines. So that's the important thing to note. The last thing I want to note is if you're using your Gaunt's Ghost in that way, then remember, it's not like the enemies are going to be able to saunter up to them and start chopping them to pieces, because you're running a guard army. Remember, there's probably going to be 100 infantry between Gaunt and the enemy. So it means that they really are able to sit there and more often than not, plink away at the enemy without a lot of firepower coming back their way. However, if you are planning on using them this way, just be aware that you're going to want to have a little bit of a thought and a bit of a game plan around what kind of objectives these guys are going to be sitting on. Because if you're going to have them sat on your backfield home objective, there's a much cheaper way of doing that. Take an infantry squad, if you really want to, stick a mortar in it, and it can sit behind a big L-shaped ruin, being innately obsec, chucking some mortar rounds at the enemy, but generally just achieving those primary points. I would use these guys to capture mid-board objectives, especially if you want to think about like infiltrating some people forward onto them. Because sure, that does mean that they'll probably be within 18-inch range of the enemy, so they might be able to be targeted. But don't forget, this unit does have the character keyword, like a command squad. Okay? So you can have this unit sat at an objective, and as long as there are other units around it, they're going to be protected by Lookout Sir. And they're still going to be able to shoot away at the enemy with impunity and have a good time. And Gaunt can order himself, and he can order the units around him because he comes with 2 orders. So that would be how I would use it. Think about using them for mid-board pressure and locking down different areas rather than holding your very backfield objective. You've got cheaper ways of doing that. Another way you can use this unit is to support a Scout Sentinel pressure build. This is where you take 2 to 3 squads of Scout Sentinels and you load them up with guns and Sentinel chainswords and you forward deploy them. Even if you're not sure you're going to get first turn, you still forward deploy them. And the idea is that your opponent is going to have to try and chew through these 9 Scout Sentinels if they get the first turn, and it's really going to mess them up and move block them and kind of disrupt their plans. And by the time they've chewed through a lot of Sentinel wounds, your rest of your army has moved forward, is sitting on objectives, has been blasting them, has been shooting them, has been having a good time. Bear in mind, Scout Sentinels are pretty cheap. It's a pretty effective tactic. Now, Gaunt's Ghosts can also forward deploy. And as we've said, they're pretty durable and their combat output is respectable. So they certainly can become a 4th part of that Scout Sentinel pressure build. And what's really cool is because Gaunt knows orders, he can order the Scout Sentinels around. So if you've got a bunch of Sentinels with chainswords, then you can be like, look, you guys are definitely going to want to be fixing bayonets. You want to be getting +1 to hit, +1 AP on the Sentinel chainswords. You've got the drop on the enemy. Maybe if you've got first turn, this is really effective. And you're like, right, we've got the drop on the enemy. We're going to fix bayonets. We're going to do a really early pressure build. All of the Sentinels are going to be going in. Gaunt's Ghost is going to be going in. And it's dozens of wounds that your opponent has got to chew through in the first couple of turns of the game before they even start getting to the rest of your army. And 3 units of Scout Sentinels, it's like 360 points. You add Gaunt's Ghost into it, it's about 480 points. You know, chuck some Scout Sentinel chainswords, and you're probably looking about 500 points-ish. 500 points to really hem your opponent in the deployment zone and really distract them for 2 or 3 turns is it's a pretty good bargain. I'd take that deal. Would you take that deal? I'd take that deal. Damn right. It's a damn good deal. And so Gaunt's Ghost can really help with that. If you're looking for a slightly less risky way of doing this, then what you can do is you can take Gaunt's Ghost and 2 units of Sentinels, and then take another officer with the Warlord trait, Master Tactician. This allows you to redeploy 3 units. So if you forward deploy your Sentinels and your Gaunt's Ghosts, and then the enemy gets turn 1, and you reckon, I haven't got enough here to slow them down, they're probably going to come at me and chew through me and it's not going to be good, then you can use Master Tactician to safely redeploy Gaunt's Ghosts into that first role we talked about, holding objectives. You can redeploy the Scout Sentinels into a fire support role. If I was to do a Sentinel pressure build, I would do it with 2 unit Sentinels and Gaunt's Ghosts. It'll cost you the same amount of points, but I feel that's more flexible. Because Gaunt can order both units of the Sentinels. He can make up for the fact that he's job enough to count as that 3rd unit Sentinels. And if it all goes sideways, you can use Master Tactician to pull yourself out of the sticky situation and start playing a slightly more different part of your game plan. That's how I would do a Sentinel pressure build, and that's how I would use Gaunt's Ghost to really, really boost its effectiveness. The final way that I would use Gaunt's Ghost is as a bully squad. This is where you take a unit that isn't able to go toe-to-toe with other combat specialists. Look, you send Gaunts Ghost into unit Berserkers, Gaunts Ghost is going to get turned into little chunks of meat on the ground very quickly. All right. But if you send Gaunts Ghost into a unit that's in a similar weight category to them, light infantry, other guardsmen, or fire warriors, or guardians, then you'll find that they're actually pretty good at beating those units up. I mean, you've got an average of 18 attacks from this squad, including Gaunt's Chainsword. And at a base level, these attacks are AP -1. And they're going to be hitting worse on a 3+. But a lot of these attacks are hitting on a 2+ innately between Gaunt and McCall, right? And then don't forget that if you've spent a CP to give Gaunt a Warlord trait, he can tell his squad to fix bayonets, which means suddenly all 18 of these attacks are hitting on a 2+. Now, they are only strength 3. You could get around that by making them brutal strength, but you have to build your whole army around that then, and you're probably going to want to use Born Soldiers. So let's say they're still strength 3. But that's more than enough for taking on enemy light infantry, because most light infantry is toughness 3. So you're going to be hit on 2s, you'll be wounding on 4s. The enemy's going to be taking -2 to their armor save, because straight silver plus fixed bayonets equals -2, which means a lot of light infantry won't get a save, or at best they're getting a 6 up. And you're looking at a squad that can reliably beat up a 5-man squad of enemy light infantry a turn and not really risk taking much damage in return for that. Now, there are 2 ways that I would try and use this bully squad game plan. Either I would try and sneak the unit up the battlefield from one way or another, be that strategic reserve, or be it in a transport, or be it just forward deploying them, putting them out of line of sight and hoping your opponent kind of forgets about them whilst you set an objective, or maybe move your way forward and try and get a jump on one of their backfield units. There's that way. That way I think is pretty difficult. I think the majority of the time, if your opponent has half decent screening, you won't get near that backfield unit. Or the majority of the time, your opponent will just kill Gaunts Ghost on the way. So that's a bit of a problem. The way I find this to be more effective, in my mind, is as a counter-attack unit. So you've got a squad here that has got all the abilities of an officer that can put out some decent long-range shooting. And when the enemy gets close, is a unit you don't need to worry about getting stuck in and doing some damage with them. So that is how I would use Gaunts Ghost. I'd have that whole I'm going to sneak forward and take you off an objective you're not expecting card in my back pocket. But primarily, I'm still thinking around mid-board objectives. I'm still thinking around playing that primary game in a more straightforward way. And I'm thinking that having this unit supported by some infantry squads is a great way of locking down an objective. And if you need something that can play in combat, you've got something that can do it. That's how I see this squad working. So that covers all of the positives and the different ways you can use this unit on the battlefield. And you can see they are pretty helpful. They're pretty cool. They're pretty useful. But before you all rush out there and buy a bunch of Gaunts Ghosts, it's important to know the disadvantage of a squad. Because no unit in this game is perfect. Unless it's Tower Eldar, but they're just bullshit broken factions. But apart from that, no unit is perfect, and Gaunts Ghost does have some pretty significant drawbacks. The first problem is that for an HQ choice, they are actually pretty pricey. In terms of infantry-based officers, they are by far the most expensive. They're more expensive than Creed, they're more expensive than Strachan, they're more expensive than a Command Squad or a Castellan, anything like that. They're far more expensive. In fact, these guys are more expensive than if you took Creed and a Death Watch Marshal. So 120 points is pretty expensive when it comes to guard HQs. In fact, if you take out Tank Command, because they're more of a tank-based officer and they work a little bit differently to your infantry-based ones, these guys are actually the second most expensive officer that you can field in your army. Because the Lord Solar is 170 points and these guys come in at 120 points. So they're pricey. And in the guard, you have to have a pretty good data sheet and a pretty good reason to justify a points cost like that. Another big disadvantage of the unit is that, quite frankly, they take up a very valuable HQ slot. Thanks to Arcs of Omen, most guard players are running around with a limit of 4 HQ choices. And in most typical guard lists, those HQ choices are spoken for pretty much straight away. In fact, my recommended loadout for anyone getting into the guard for the HQ section is Tank Commander, 2 Deathwatch Marshals or Cading Castellans, and a Command Squad. There is no room for Gaunts Ghosts in the HQ section. So if you're taking them, they're not something I think you can just slap in your list. They have to have a pretty good reason for displacing one of those other units, which are a lot more take-all-comers and a lot more straightforward to use. And that leads me on to my next point, which is these guys are pretty complicated. Between all the different weapon systems, data sheet abilities, and little tricks that you can pull off with them, they're not an easy unit to get your head around. You are going to have to develop a specific game plan for bringing them, and that game plan is going to have a few layers in order for it to be effective. So I would not recommend Gaunts Ghosts for a beginner, unless you want them just for fun. But of course, when we're talking competitively and trying to get the most out of your army, I would say they are a little bit specialist for your beginner guard players. For someone who is pretty experienced with guard, bit of a long beard, got a few campaigns under their belt, got the old medallion crimson pinned on their chest, I think Gaunts Ghost is a fantastic unit and you'll probably be able to get some pretty good play out of it. But even so, you are going to have to switch your brain on. You are going to have to think, right, how am I specifically going to use this unit? Because if I haven't got a game plan built around it, I might as well have just taken a command squad. Or I might as well just taken a proper senior officer. And that last part is really important to note because Gaunt is not a proper senior officer. He might be able to do 2 orders, but he has no auras. He does not hand out any form of reroll 1s, not to hit, not to wound. And that is a massive, massive drawback. Because in the guard, the number one thing that we're getting from our officers right now, even more so than orders, is those reroll auras. They're so clutch. Being able to overcharge your plasma with almost no risk is fantastic. Being able to get your Kazakin and your sounds not only hitting on a 2+ thanks to take aim, but also rerolling 1s makes them into bloody custodies for a fraction of the price. Okay, so they are really, really good, but they rely upon reroll 1s to hit. And because Gaunt doesn't bring that to the table, he doesn't even bring reroll 1s to wound to the table. Honestly, you're going to struggle to justify taking him in most guard lists because really that's what your HQs are there to do, to support. And speaking of support, these guys don't come with a Voxcaster either, which means that Gaunt is going to have to be pretty much on the front lines in order for you to get orders out of him, at which point some of your other abilities like Tanith Camo Cloak start becoming less relevant, as we've mentioned before. One way I would sort of sum this up is, at the beginning of the video, I said they're like a blend of a command squad and a Castellan and an elite unit. Yeah, they are. They are a blend of all those things. But they don't do any of those things as good as a dedicated combat unit, a dedicated command squad, a dedicated senior officer. They do a little bit of all those things, but if you really want a good close combat unit, you better get yourself some Rough Riders or some Bulgrin. If you really want a proper command squad who can support your units from a long distance, you're going to need a proper command squad. And if you really want a senior officer out there who's able to hand out rerolls and do a couple of orders, then you need a proper Cading Castellan or Deathcore Marshal. Gaunts Ghosts can do a little bit of all these things, but a specialist unit that's dedicated to one of them is always going to outperform it in that area. So now that we have gone over the advantages and the disadvantages and all the ways that you can use this unit on the battlefield, it's time for everyone's favorite part, the arbitrary score out of 10. And I decided to give Gaunts Ghost a 6 out of 10, which does mean that it is Mordian approved. Now, some of you might think that with all the different tactical flexibilities this unit has, giving it a 6 out of 10 might be a little bit harsh, but bear with me. When I give a unit a 6 out of 10, that doesn't mean it's a bad squad. It means that most commanders will be able to include this unit in their lists and they'll be able to have some fun with it, but it's not a top tier squad. If you build your game plan around it, then you might be able to get some very good, effective battlefield uses out of the squad. But for the vast majority of Imperial Guard players out there, Gaunts Ghosts is not something that they need to be putting into their list. They can absolutely do some work, but they are a bit of a specialist unit. They're a little bit more complicated and they can be a bit finicky to get working. They are certainly a unique unit and they have a lot of potential on the battlefield. But most Imperial Guard commanders will probably find that for a tournament environment where they're going to not have a huge amount of control over what kind of armies they're going to be facing, what kind of missions and matchups they're going to be encountering, most Guard commanders in that sort of situation are going to find themselves needing a unit that is a little bit more straightforward and a little bit more take all comers and less situational. And so that's why I'm giving the squad a 6 out of 10. It's perfectly usable, but it is in no way a mandatory or auto-include squad for your army. But that is all just like my opinion, man. Let me know what you think down in the comment section below. Do you think that Gaunts Ghosts absolutely are a top tier unit, or like me, do you think they're more of a fun unit that can be used competitively when you have a proper game plan for them? Let me know your thoughts down in that comment section. If you have enjoyed today's episode, then make sure you smash that like button like your big titty elder girlfriend, and also subscribe to never miss an episode. And if you found today's video particularly helpful, then please consider becoming a channel member or Patreon supporter. One of the big bonuses you get for being a channel member or Patreon is access to the Mordian Glory Discord. This is an online community of almost 1,000 active members. It is always popping off in the MG Discord. It's a really fast-growing community that is very friendly and fun, and we also have lots of experienced players in there as well, so it can be a very powerful resource. We've got a tactics section, army list, painting, hobbying, and also a pretty spicy meme channel as well. So that sounds like a ton of fun. Consider becoming a channel member or Patreon supporter and getting yourself in the MG community. And I'd just like to take a moment to say a massive thank you to all of the latest channel members and Patreon supporters. So a huge thank you to Zach Silby, Wicked Assassin 55, Andrew Ali, A Lot to Fluffy Hair, Christian, Thomas, Luke Quadling, Ike and Ike, Leroy Jenkins, Blissful Badger, David Stringfellow, Nico, Tom Curtis, Paint Liquors Paint Pot, Steve Rackas, Harley Holdcroft, Sunny D, British Trex, Joshua Renoff, M.O., Max Rowe, Marcus William, Tony Tiger, Abraham Stetcher, Lorenzo, Bruce Bracken, Connor M, Chris Mullin, Aaron Bill 3, Daniel Murphy, Dylan Cicero, Chenkov, and Hunter 404. Thank you guys for doing your part. Thank you for becoming channel members. I also want to do a shout out to my latest Patreons as well. So a massive bunker busting thank you to Jareth, Zachary, Matthew, Erica, Nathan, Dakota, Peter, Tim, Leslie, Max, Gibraltar, SM, Philip, Theoria, Kit Kat, and Sweet and Sour Ass. Thank you guys for becoming Patreon supporters. And last but certainly not least, I want to say a personal, heartfelt, special thank you to all of my top tier Patreon supporters. These are the War Masters, the people who have truly gone above and beyond the call of duty. So a massive thank you to Alan Blunt III, Bonbon Vert, Mark Panconi, Ross Miller, Swordfish Trombone, Watchmaster 134-4, Alex Dengal, John Stubbs, Nick Walsh, Diesel Fox, Tom Sutton, and August Varney. Thank you guys. Your ongoing and generous Patreon support makes a huge, huge difference. I hope you've all enjoyed today's video. Thank you for watching. And of course, as always, I'll see you guys next time.